Tanishka is already known to some of you, it's clear, or the Moon Woman, as some also would call her. She has done something rather clever over the years, because she's talked about the divine feminine and goddess wisdom, but also talked about the divine masculine. Yes, such a thing does exist. And the balance is, of course, so important. But, then when you start to put that together with Grail legends and how that sort of relates to the land and, our relationship to it, you realize that there's so much more depth to all this symbolism. And we're going to hear about this tonight. So it's such a fantastic opportunity to meet Tanishka, who lives in Australia normally. So she's come a very long way. Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
And when she leaves us here, she's heading off to the Edinburgh Fringe. So this is a big month. So listen, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to shut up now. And please, a big hand for Tanishka. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, it's so lovely being here. I've had such a lovely time. And I am so overjoyed to not have to do all the grunt work, just to turn up and speak. So thank you so much, not just to you, but to your whole team. Yeah, and for Jason and his partner for suggesting me as a speaker. All right, so let's get on. I've got a lot to say. Exciting. So I've been speaking about the Grail since 2012. And every time I get asked to speak, more insights come. So it's a gift for me as well. So let's see what happens. So if we mention the Grail today, this is what most people think of, right? Which isn't altogether a bad thing. I had a previous career as a stand-up comedian, so I'm all for the the Python crew. Alternatively, they think of this, right? The Last Supper. Or this, Da Vinci Code, right? Now, these associations are very telling because the Grail was deliberately shrouded in mystery, yeah? It's been referred to as the greatest mystery of all time. Yeah, well, that was deliberate. The role of the, oh goodness. There we go. The role of the mystic feminine in the ancient world, going all the way back to Mesopotamia, was to unveil the illusions that are the root of all human suffering and unveil the truth, right, that sets us free. So here we see, an artist's representation of Salome, who was a priestess of Venus, known as Ishtar, the ascended Venus, and her priestesses would do the dance of the seven veils once they had graduated from their initiation of the archetypal heroine's journey. Unlike the hero's journey, the 12-step journey, the heroine's journey is a largely untold story, and it's a 7-step journey out of the underworld, undertaken by Psyche, which doesn't mean mind, it means soul. It's a Greek word, it also means butterfly and cure. So reenactments of this mythic ascension from the underworld was actually the ancient cure for depression. More about that later. So this is the reason that the mystic feminine was persecuted by the empire. So we were burnt, we were drowned, our lands were taken for 500 years. But of course, the persecution extended far beyond that 500-year period. Ask any midwife trying to get insurance. Ooh, I can't laugh on this thing or that's going to make your ears bleed. Sorry about that. So, right? Yes. So, like the adage, the truth will set us free. Essentially, a Shaktified woman is an enemy of the state, all right? A woman who has activated her Kundalini, her serpent power, and her central channel of Sushumna has a direct link to the quantum field of infinite intelligence. And this is why, instead of universities in the ancient world, we'd train at a mystery school. Because once you've got that, you don't need knowledge, yeah? You've got gnosis, inner knowing. So the feminine, here we have my favourite image of Sheila Nagig. In Australia, women are colloquially known as Sheila. Hey, Sheila. And it's, I dare say, coming from the convict roots that we would open our yoni for any passerby. I dare say not. But here we see the goddess of death and rebirth. There was actually a map I had years ago of all the Sheila gigs in Bridget's Isles, which of course, when we were colonised, got renamed the British Isles. But yeah, women don't just birth children. Traditionally, our role was to midwife second births, soul rebirths, through helping people through times of change. Yeah, having done readings for years, as many of you I'm sure have here in this room, people come when they're in a state of crisis, and it's a great honour to sit with someone at the crossroads and to gather wisdom by hearing everybody's stories, yeah? So this was our role. We would help initiate people over the thresholds of the 4 life stages. For women, that's maiden, mother, mage and crone, like spring, summer, autumn and winter. For men, that's knight, king, magi and sage. Okay. So I want to just state at the outset that my service is as an oracle, and I trained that muscle of intuition many lifetimes, like many of you in this room, but also doing readings, channeling teachings and initiation paths. So the information that I have is not from a book, it's not from a recognised lineage, it's just downloaded. So it's an invitation. If it resonates in your bones, great. If it doesn't, no worries. Yeah, you're all your own authority figures, you're all sovereign beings, and I respect that. Oh yeah, thanks. Fuck, what else are we doing here if we missed the point, if we missed that one? Anyway, so my quest for the Grail, just a little bit about me so you know where I'm coming from, bit of context. My quest for the Grail began when I was 21. It wasn't a conscious thing. I, like many of you, came from such dysfunction, which is why we all love The Simpsons, that I needed to find personal growth in a hurry or I was going to top myself. So at the age of 21, I started going to workshops, reading self-help books and things like that. Now, that's quite symbolic because 21 in the ancient world was the age that men would be welcomed to their first Holy Grail rite of passage, which I'll speak more about later. But it's significant they would receive the key to the mysteries. Now, the empire distorted that into the key to the city of men rather than the key to women's wisdom, right? Even out the front of this hall is a very ornate key in a glass box, yeah? So it's a kind of like an archaeological dig that we're on of brushing away the sands of patriarchy and seeing what the bones of truth are that lay underneath everything. But, and this one has triquetra, which I'll speak about a bit later as well, the symbol for the 3 yonic doorways, which are the doorways to the 3 worlds in the tree of life. The underworld, where our subconscious beliefs are, the everyday world, where we experience our lessons through karmic return. When I do this, this happens, right? And the upper world, looking at everything from an archetypal or symbolic level. So this age of 21 is also significant because the Grail emphasises the wisdom of the cycles, and at 21 we've completed our first 3 7-year cycles. Every 7 years we are journeying the lessons of each of the chakras, the vortices in our energy field. So 0 to 7, the wild child who runs around nudie-roody and likes to try eating sand, yeah, very much in the physical realm. 7 to 14, this is when we're more emotional, yeah, we might have big emotional flare-ups, dramas, those of us that are parents and remember being that age, little divas. And then 14 to 21, solar plexus, this is when we're in high school and we're thinking, okay, I want to achieve, I want to make mum and dad proud. When we finish those 3 cycles, this is when we were ready to be initiated into the wisdom of the heart. And this is when we're ready to make that inner psychological transition from teenager or youth to adult. Without a rite of passage at this age, we remain stunted in teenager. So we see a lot of youth today at risk of suicide wearing black, yeah, which is symbolic of their worldview being eclipsed by the shadow, the things that they don't like in themselves and the world. So they're needing us collectively as their elders to step up and initiate them. And I know that's hard when many of us didn't get initiated ourselves. More about that, but I'll keep on trucking. So, the Grail started revealing itself to me when I made it my soul quest when I was 26. And what that looked like was one day I was so desperate and fed up with the state of my life, I got down on my knees and I said, if you want me to be a woman, send me some fucking role models. And they did. That's a very powerful thing to do and mean it. So within 2 weeks, my life fell apart. I literally ran to the hills and I met a woman that looked like she'd walked out of Middle Earth, Jennifer Powell, who became my fairy godmother and let me ask her a million questions. And I'd go to her home and I'd sleep under a big painting she'd done of the Cretan snake goddess who would initiate me in the dreaming time. But I was at the time living off grid in a little hut on an underground lake, which was perfect for channeling. And this is when I taught myself yoga and tarot and cross-referenced, as I later learnt that Pythagoras did, you know, numerology, archetypes, fairy tales, all the different structures, if you will, for mapping the psyche. And apparently that's also what Joseph Campbell did, holed up in the woods in a hut and just did a sabbatical, which I would like to encourage young people to be supported to do, especially in another option to military service. But I think we'd be a much more enlightened civilization if we supported our youth to do a sabbatical in nature for a 9-month gestation to meet themselves. Yeah. So, I had a Kundalini awakening that year, which I speak about in this one-woman rock opera I'll be doing next week at Edinburgh Fest, so I won't get into that now. But I remembered who I'd been going back to Mesopotamia as a high priestess, also here in Avalon, and I started channeling what I had taught in those lifetimes, which became a series of books and practices. And then in 2011, I received my first vision of the Holy Grail, which is a rite of passage. And it was a vision of me initiating men at night in a forest. It was probably England or Europe. It wasn't until 2013 that I actually decoded what that meant. And Spirit had asked me to take a leap of faith and organise a national tour of Australia, a speaking tour. And I was a single mum at the time on benefits, which, you know, was supplementing my income, doing circles, facilitating, sharing circles and doing readings and priestess initiations. And when I decoded it, literally, the day that I decoded the Grail, the stag deer came to my front door, and I got down on my knees and I crawled and I thanked him for entrusting me with the teachings. So it's been quite a magical mystery tour that I've been led on. But it wasn't until 2018 that I started writing the book on the Grail, and then I published it on the 2nd of the 2nd, 2022 portal. I channeled that book with the help of my ancestors. So my father's people come from Anglesey, which many of you will know was the headquarters of the Druids and the last place to fall to the Roman Empire. Yeah, so I'm very proud. I didn't get to go there until last year. I went to pay my respects and do ceremony on the beach where they were slaughtered, but they held their own, like Fergus was talking about with the Cathars, rather than submit. One of my ancestors is a national folk hero, or a controversial figure to some, Iulo McGonigal. He created a secret society that was dedicated to bringing back the ancient Welsh magical knowledge and customs. So I feel that he's been here as a whisperer for me. And just on that, I want to come home, yeah? I'm not allowed to because I was born in Australia and I don't have a grandparent. I have a great-grandparent. I'm Welsh on both sides. So I look forward to the day when I can come home and reawaken the Grail rites on this land. So our ancestors, I believe, are helping us to finish what they started, which is standing up to the tyranny that stole our birthright, our access to our sacred customs. And I once thought that delivering the secret of the Holy Grail was my elixir. Yeah, I spent 4 years facilitating men around the hero's journey in alignment with the sun going around the solar wheel, okay, which is what activates the 12 stages of the hero's journey. It brings the mythos to life when you marry it with the astrological zodiac. But what was great about that is it put me through my paces. My inner masculine, my inner hero had to step up and journey each of those lessons with the men. So, you know, I was working on the Grail book and it was like, yeah, I'm living this and this is my elixir, you know, bringing this to the people. Nope. Here we see the definition of the true elixir. While many think it might be sacred knowledge or a sacred object or a healing remedy, the true elixir is a quality we develop in ourselves, how the journey changes us. So what I didn't expect and what I gained from writing this book on the Grail was it shifted my identity. So here we see the Celtic tree of life depiction. And, you know, for years I'd been working with the Shekinah, the divine feminine principle, the tree of life, like many of you, sending my roots down to ground and my branches up to great central sun and, you know, activating the twin serpents up through the chakras. But this, reclaiming my cultural identity, enabled me to weave my roots deeper, yeah, to feel that I was indeed more a part of the earth. So that meant I could shed this false identity that I had taken on, that I'd been born into, that I was Australian, yeah? This is, and when that shifted was when I wanted to come home. So now I see myself as a Celt, not an Australian, because that is my kin, that is my culture. When I hear Celtic music, it stirs something in my bones. When I see the landscape here, it opens my heart and it strikes me with its beauty. It moves me to want to write poetry in a way that the Australian landscape and I don't have that romance. So I'm not much of a fan of nationalism. In fact, I find it triggering, because nationalism divides, it carves us up into territories, borders, and as someone who is nomadic, that's, every time you have to go through security and show visas and passports, it's dehumanising. In fact, legally we're classed as cargo when we're between countries. So on an energetic level, that's also disturbing to the matrix of the soul. So we are taught, I find it very symbolic that the Olympics started the day that this event started. And so in a way it's a nice counterpoint to that, because what the empire does is it convinces us that we're coming together in global unity, but in fact we're coming together to compete, as warring nations, rather than sharing our cultural traditions, our wisdom. So this all just anchors more of Stockholm Syndrome, identifying that we are part of the empire, that that's our identity. Art is the language of the soul. Art heals. I loved it when I heard that in Ireland artists weren't taxed. I'm not sure if that's still the case. On the understanding that art provides such an essential service to the collective psyche, the world soul, because it reflects back the inner terrain. And when the inner terrain is validated, it heals us, just as invalidation traumatizes the soul. At the moment, we're seeing an escalation of trauma to the soul with the elevation of artificial intelligence, which is not natural intelligence coming from the quantum field, that is elegant, that is truth, that is simple, that is beautiful. Sport is the expression of the ego. It's ritualized warfare. It's competitive. It divides. Here we see the appropriation of our customs. There's the torch of life force, of Kundalini, the force. But we have to fight for it. We aim to be the best. It's about supremacy. In my Grail book, I speak about how the Olympics originally was set up as a ritual. They used to harvest the sweat off young, nude male athletes. Ancient Greece was a very pedophilic culture. The older men would take young boys, and it was acceptable that they would be there for their sexual favours in exchange for a free education. And so this is what our modern day culture is built upon, and we wonder why we have pedophilic rings when we hold up the Greco-Roman as the golden age. Here we see where they stole and appropriated that symbolism, the Borromean rings, which was an ancient goddess symbol. There we see the triquetra in the middle. So this was about honouring the sacred Trinity, whether you know that as Maiden Mother Crone or Night King Sage or, the three worlds, it's all the above. So symbols are very powerful because the third eye only speaks in symbols. So all the appropriation of our symbols has been black magic, occult magic to manipulate us. And that's why we were dumbed down around magic, which is simply the conscious use of energy and intention, taught to fear it. And originally women weren't permitted at the Olympics, okay? Yeah. So, quick definition of colonialism: the practice of acquiring control over another country and occupying it with settlers and exploiting it economically. So, we've all been colonised. It is appropriate that we have compassion for our brothers and sisters that, are at risk of being colonised or are being exploited. But what we've seen is this branding campaign, as awareness grew about the injustices of colonised cultures, to deflect blame so that we didn't go, hey, the empire, bit of a problem there. They came up with this, getting us to divide ourselves into seeing ourselves as black or white. Yeah? This is defining ourselves by what we can see on the outside, which is how the ego defines us, white or black. Inside, we're all the rainbow body. Yeah? So, not only that, we've been every culture, we've been around the block, we've had so many lives. So us quibbling over who's white and black in this lifetime is a circus of distraction. But like this chessboard, it's a strategy of war. Divide and conquer, as Fergus spoke of. If I view myself through the lens of colonialism, I take on a false blanket of shame. I see myself as a guilty white person. Yeah, that is a great disservice to me. But more importantly, if I'm holding guilt in my energy field and in my subconscious, I will unconsciously attract punishment. I will think I deserve to be punished. That's dangerous. My favourite quote from Steve Biko of the apartheid era in South Africa is, "The most important thing in the hands of the oppressor is the minds of the oppressed." So I'm not part of the empire. I'm part of the earth. That is my true cultural identity. Because we're all Indigenous. We're all part of the earth. We're fractals of the Gaia consciousness. Yes, we're all hybrids, from the stellar realms and Cro-Magnon man, the Anunnaki mixed up quite a brew, needing a new slave race. And of course, now is our time. We're outgrowing them. It's quite exciting. It's like teenagers getting ready to leave home. So, it isn't just the cultures who manage to retain their ancestral customs. And yes, growing up in Australia, it's the most painful awareness of the atrocities that have been perpetrated on the oldest race in the world. And there are mystic people, there are gentle people. But compassion is what will heal guilt. Guilt is a waste of energy, as Osho said. It's one of the lowest frequencies. It's like tar. It's like treacle once you get stuck in it. Any mum or dad has had parent guilt. So with this awareness that we've all been colonised, that creates common ground and unity. I had a lovely experience for my 50th, not the experience I thought I was going to have, it was in 2020. a beautiful Indigenous sister gifted me a welcome to Australia, and it healed something deep in me. I sobbed a lot. And her dad was Celtic, so I got to teach her about some of the mystic customs from the Celtic tradition, and it was a beautiful exchange. So it's time for us to reclaim what was stolen when our sacred ancestral lands were taken by force and colonised by the empire. Because our lost sacred rights and our human rights, I've spelt that wrong, are intertwined. You can't have one without the other. Human rights are not just political. Politics is of the mind. This goes much deeper. We are multi-dimensional beings, so every issue is multi-dimensional. By reclaiming our true cultural identity, the reign of the empire will be over. And if that is a triggering statement and image to witness, I invite you to consider if Stockholm Syndrome is something sitting in your psyche, perhaps unconsciously. Because this flag, the Union Jack, is an overlay of this. That's an ancient Grail symbol. When the men were anointed with the holy blood of the womb by the high priestess in the Holy Grail rite, that was the symbol made on their third eye. It is an intrinsic part of your culture that your kings swore their allegiance to the earth and to uphold and protect the sacred feminine. That the empire came and overlaid it and rebranded it is an abuse. So we see the allegiance to the Grail was intrinsic to this culture, to this land. Bridget's Isles, like Ireland or Europa, these were the lands of the ancient goddesses. So what actually is the Grail? What's she banging on about? Is she going to get to the point? Yes, I am. So first of all, what it isn't. This is what we've been told, all right? This is the smoke and mirrors. This is the veil that's been put over the Grail. We've been told that it was Yeshua's blood. So the Greeks renamed Yeshua Jesus. So I prefer to call him by his name. But that it was blood taken from him as it was spurting out when he's hanging on the cross. I mean, who'd think of doing that to a man? Oh, can't laugh on that, can I? Then, of course, there's the claims that it's the bloodline of Yeshua and Mari. Now, who is caught up with bloodlines? Right? Have a think about that. And then others claim it's the chalice that was used in the Last Supper. So the Grail, it dates back to Mesopotamia, the Rosicrucius, yeah? It then went through Egypt and through old Europe and to Bridget's Isles. This is an overlay that came later, yeah? In my book, I go through a chronological timeline of all the claims of the Grail and compare the Celtic with the later overlays. So this is my knowing of what it is. And to be transparent, the way that I brought through the revelations about the Grail was by working with my Grail, my holy blood. Yeah, I would anoint myself, I would put it on my tongue, and I would channel. And I had my moon for 3 consecutive years over the winter solstice. So that's when I brought the information through. Because for those who don't know, a woman who's on her moon time, she's in a trance state. So we don't need plant medicine, it's all within us. So the cup of soul wisdom that heals the unbalanced mind, the wisdom of the heart, because intuition comes from the quantum field of infinite loving intelligence down through the crown, and it strikes the heart like a bell. And you just get a knowing. Okay, that's Excalibur. That's the sword of truth. It's not a physical sword. It's also, so it's many things. It's multidimensional. The wisdom of the cycles taught by the mystic feminine. The term Magdalene, it means watchtower, and that's thanks to Lawrence Gardner's research. I understand he spoke at some of the earlier symposiums. He's now on his vision quest in the mythic realms. But so the Magdalene, she was the keeper of the flock. She was the spiritual leader of the people. And then there was the king of the land. So they shared power. He had the physical power of the external world, and she had the power of the inner world. And he could not rule unless on the day of the great rite, New Year's Day, the spring equinox, when he went to her temple, she declared that he was mature and therefore responsible enough with a mantle of power to lead the people. So they had that caveat there that ensured we didn't end up with tyrants, the most disempowered people seeking power compulsively as an addiction at the helm. So the Grail or the Grail was also the sacred elixir. Just like we use stem cells, same blood, right? It is so powerful it can heal cuts. It can turn silver hair back to black, right? It was used to charge up healing amulets. It's used for psychic protection, boundaries of properties. It has so many incredible uses. So it was the most sacred substance in the world. It's why we associate royal colours as deep blood red and gold. Through working with the blood, the holy blood, you would awaken the pure gold of consciousness and be a true royal. Because in the Grail lineages, you didn't get to be royal by birthright. You had to do your initiations in the mystery schools to awaken the inner serpent. That's why we have the insignia of the Kundalini cobra on the headdresses of the pharaohs. Yeah, you had to be responsible with power to have power. The Grail was also a very complex series of initiation rites. I spoke earlier of... did I speak earlier? Anyway, whatever. No, I'll park that. But let's just say... the Grail assisted people to grow with the cycles on the understanding that the cycles are what initiate us. Okay? So the seasonal wheel, the 8 Sabbats or the star of Ishtar, the 8-pointed star, which are the vortices of the earth, so the equinoxes, the solstices and the cross-quarter points, they initiate us through our relationship lessons. Okay? This is why you'd get married for a year and a day, yeah? Instead of till death do us part, which is not as civilized, yeah? You'd have the opportunity to journey the wheel, see if you could do the dance of the shadow descent, autumn down to midwinter, the most perilous time for a relationship. Because if you're not doing an initiation path, a Grail path, to become a dragon queen or a dragon king or a year king or a year queen as they were known in the Grail tradition, then you're going to scapegoat your shadow onto your partner in order for your ego to feel superior. which is why today we have a divorce rate of 50% without the Grail. So that's just one of the initiation rites. So the Grail was the lost mystic tradition that the Roman Empire appropriated to create their cult of Rome, which is a war state, Christianity. I know that's quite a controversial statement. So I'll let that just land for a moment. My knowing is that just as Sufism was distorted to create Islam and the Kabbalah distorted to create Judaism, the Grail was distorted to create Christianity. What happened, we moved from mystic traditions where the power was in the experience. The ceremonies were inclusive. Yeah, the ritual plays, the ritual theatre. They even let the prisoners out in ancient Greece to attend the Eleusinian rites. It was considered so essential for the health of the collective psyche. But with the turning of the wheel and the rise of the empires, it became organised religion. It became an instrument, a vehicle for control and manipulation. So you'd enter into the Gothic doors that mimicked the vulva of Sheila na gig. Yeah? So the Grail had to go underground. It was hidden in tarot, in tapestries and heraldry, and I decode all of those. There's a lot of pictures in my book. But this, let me speak to this for a sec. I'll just have a slug of my tea. The Last Supper, which then became the Eucharist. So I spoke earlier about the holy blood, the life-giving blood, the blood that has no negative karmic imprint because no one has been hurt, right? When we don't have our sacred blood rites, we need ritual. If we don't have healthy rituals, we will create rituals in order to process change. This is why we see teenage boys passing a bong around the lounge room if they don't have a talking stick, right? Or spray painting a tag on the side of a train if they don't get taken by elders to chew up ochre and spit their hand on a cave wall that says, "I exist." So again, as elders, we need to say to our youth, you're not going to be blindly led into a dystopian future. We are here for you. Come. We're going to initiate you. So what Rome did, and it's the ultimate insult, they took Yeshua and Mari's legacy and they distorted it. So this whole idea of the Eucharist, this is a blood sacrifice. They're saying, drink of this man's blood who suffered for you. Yeah, that's heavy. And a distortion. It's everything that they were not about. So here we see the mandala, which is everywhere here. So initiates of the Grail, when the Grail had to go underground, they would draw a circle in the dirt, and if the other person just drew a circle in the dirt, they went, it's safe to speak freely. Another initiate of the Grail. Okay. So this is also what happens during an eclipse, the coming together of sun and moon. Yeah, it's a time of pregnant change. We are living in epic times. We all know that. We chose to be here for this. And this beautiful doorway is the shift of the ages between the Piscean age, where being a water sign, we drank our toxin, we journeyed and discovered by ship, by boat, and like the two fishes, we were exploring the lessons of duality. You're either a man or a woman, good, bad, sacred, profane. Everything was black and white. But moving now into the Aquarian age, an air sign, people are smoking their toxin. We're sending microwave energy and Wi-Fi through the air. We're travelling in aeroplanes. So you can see the turning of the wheel and how that influences us as a collective psyche. But transition times are when we're also at our most vulnerable. We've only got to look at the fact that right now on the planet, twice as many teenage girls are rejecting their gender than boys. It's the end game of patriarchy, internalized misogyny. So, like the word crisis, it's also opportunity. That eye in the centre of the mandala is both the eye of the storm and the eye of insight, like the eye of Horus. So 2020 is when we got 2020 sight, yeah? It was an opportunity to open our eyes and to see the shadow. Yes, it was an initiation. And it's like the grain of sand that makes the pearl. If we didn't get probed, we wouldn't be stepping up into our sovereignty. So we have to bless it at all. It's all part of the divine plan. And Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab, they're players on the stage. So we bless them. We don't fear them. They've taken on very heavy karma for all of us, and they're just the catalyst. They're the ones most separate from Source. So let's have compassion for them. So we have this opportunity coming up to pass through the eye of the needle in the Golden Nebula into the photon belt or the photon band. Just a show of hands, who in the early 90s read The Pleiadian Agenda by Barbara Handclough? Yeah. Cool. Nanu. So that's the first time I heard about the photon belt. If you're wondering what the fuck I'm talking about. So real quick, I've got a whole video masterclass on my website dedicated to this called The Shift into the Light. So I won't go into it all here. But suffice to say, photons are self-generating particles of light. And during the astrological age of Aquarius, which we're moving into, and its opposite sign, Leo, our entire solar system moves into a part of the galaxy known as the photon belt. We're bathed in the force, right? So we go through a complete renaissance. And when we're in it, electricity doesn't work. So the wet dream of the globalists, the technocracy, will be kicked to the curb in an instant. Right? Yeah. I try to tell as many young people this as possible because it's a pretty bleak world. It's hard enough when you're going through the shadowlands of your teenage years and your 20s, let alone having the world having a psychotic break. So I'll keep on moving, but it's good news. Yeah, it's the darkest before the dawn. And this is a test. We need to move into the heart. You can't go through. You've got to match the frequency of this higher dimension that we're moving into. We've got to move into the heart. So everything that's testing our ego at the moment, that's breaking us down, is so that we break down, humble the ego, reach out and go, okay, thy will, not my will. So we can experience the grace of being directed through the heart. What do you want me to do now? What about now? What about now? rather than imposing the will of the small self onto our reality and getting angry when things don't match. All a work in progress. So, for us to move into the heart, we've got to transcend, we've got to move up out of the solar plexus, out of the lower mental body, out of duality. If we don't, our polarization will destroy us. Polarization is what causes conflict. Right now, our world is more polarized than it's ever been. And they're generating that karma drama through all their syndicated media. Yeah? Traditionally, the role of the mystics was to midwife the collective psyche through times of transition. And we do that by helping people to integrate the so-called opposites within us. So here we see feminine, masculine, spirit and matter. This is what opens the rose in the heart. And that is the all-seeing eye right there. A kid knows their own heart, their conscience. The truth is simple. We don't need external rules. We need to learn how to listen to our heart, how to recognise the wisdom of our heart, Spirit speaking to us directly. We don't need rabbis and priests. So this idea that the all-seeing eye, you must go through certain degrees, this is a distortion. Yeah, this Masonic idea is the ego hijacking the soul's journey into one of spiritual ambition based on hierarchy. You know, each one of the chakras, as the Sufis call them, are the eyes of God. We want to open all of them, and then life is multidimensional. We can do that by activating our Kundalini. All the 300 Asclepian healing temples in ancient Greece, that's how they healed the soul. Through dance, through music, through art, through dream analysis. All of these ancient healing modalities that are coming back. So, here we see the Sanskrit mandala for the heart, and it represents the intercepting triangles. The white path, which is the path of ascension, the path of the sacred masculine, the path of seeking union with the Divine Father. This is the path of purification through yoga, meditation and fasting. If we're only on the white path, we will fall victim to spiritual ambition. We'll want to be pure, have the perfect mindset, the perfect yoga body. We might say, no, I can't be in a relationship with a person because sex is dirty. I need to meditate every day and be pure, right? We've got to balance it with the red path, the path of seeking union with the Divine Mother. This is the path of Tantra, shamanism, blood mysteries, the Grail. It's the humbling of the ego. It's not spiritual to be ungrounded. We need to be embodied. So, there we have it. John Travolta, the magician's pose, came back in the 70s. Yeah? And this is why, just like the magician, Yeshua was often shown wearing white and red. White, semen, red the blood. Yeah, white spirit, red the good red road of the Earth Mother. And the Magdalens wore red. You would see a Magdalene in the town square or the market. Oh, my daughter needs a monarch ceremony. You know her because she's wearing red. The woman in red. The Magdalens were the ones that initiated both men and women into the Grail mysteries. So there we have the big yoni. The ego must die. You enter a woman, your ego is getting beheaded. Even atheists yell, "Oh God," when they come, right? Yep, we are the stairway to heaven. Here we see the image of the final card in the major arcana of the tarot, the Magdalene, the Lady of the Waters, who was a living embodiment of the Vesica Pisces, a sacred vessel of the mystic, the fish, one who swam in the oceanic consciousness, who went down into the depths of the subconscious to bring back pearls of wisdom, like the sacred salmon in the Celtic mythos. But her laurel wreath was appropriated. Here we see a rebranding of the empire, first as Rome, then as the Third Reich, and now the United Nations. Same empire, just different logos. So they've deliberately used the laurel wreath as an affirmation that they will be victorious. But all three of those entities were all on a quest for world dominance. Now, you don't seek to control people unless you're very afraid, right? Remember that. We can't fear them. They're more afraid of us than we are of them. And that yoni symbol was appropriated by the Roman Empire with their art, both for Yeshua and his mother. And in my book I speak about how dysfunctional it is that the image that was constantly impressed upon us as male-female relating was mother-son. Not helpful. Yeah? So you've, I dare say, heard the biblical quote, "It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven." This eye of the needle, yeah, the doorway into the kingdom of the divine that we're getting ready for. And no, I'm not going to offer you Kool-Aid. A camel drinks sometimes, whereas a rich man never drinks from the sacred Grail cup of feminine wisdom. He doesn't value it. He doesn't recognise it when it's in front of him. He's too busy. It's like, oh, I've got other priorities. But our lesson as we come to the end of this 2,000-year Piscean age is to awaken the mystic within all of us. She is the feminine archetype that governs the third eye. And the soul is both feminine and masculine. We all have 7 faces of the goddess and 7 faces of the god as the guardians that govern the chakras. So the Grail is how we heal duality, which is what perpetuates the paradigm of war. So we won't have peace by writing it on Christmas cards, funnily enough, but by doing the work. Like the rainmaker, what happens on the inner, the microcosm, is how we affect the macrocosm. So here we see the symbol of the mystic, the fish, is one who seeks to balance opposites in themselves, who focuses on internal alchemy rather than the dramas out there. This symbol that was appropriated as the Christian fish, it represents those 2 intercepting arcs. It's about union. The Grail was all about union. It prepared people for sacred union. So when you entered puberty, if you were a young woman, you would do the path of the 13 moons. You'd sit with women of all generations at dark moon, the time when your shadow came up and your wounds were up, and you would journey the new moon in every sign and see what shadow it brought up every month. and you'd reflect on your choices and you'd become accountable to yourself. If you were a young man, you would do the path of the 12 sons, which is journeying the hero's journey in brotherhood with the support of fellowship. Just as Yeshua and Uther Pendragon had the support of brothers. You can't become a sacred leader without fellowship to keep you accountable. Through brotherly and sisterly love, we then can be in right relationship with our opposite. If we can't do brother-sister, we can't do union. So, the fishermen that Yeshua chose, they weren't out catching snapper. They were mystics. Yep, they were men that bowed to the wisdom of the Fisher King, one of the Grail parables. The Fisher King warns what happens when a man doesn't seek the Grail. You probably know the story, this guy that appears to have everything, but he can't enjoy it. His soul is tormented, he's restless, and he's portrayed as a man who every night in his court, there's people partying, and he's laying there on a crib with a gammy leg, often in the wound is around his crutch, which represents that his sense of male virility, his sense of power is injured. If we think about how much Viagra is selling, yeah, Houston, we got a problem. So this is an excerpt from The Fisher King, which T.S. Eliot's the poem The Wasteland was based on. There was once a land that was sick. Cattle didn't reproduce, the crops wouldn't grow, men were dying, children were orphaned, and women wept, all because the king was wounded. The prophecy said when the king was healed, the land would be healed. Because everything is interconnected. So what we do to ourselves, we do to the land. No point in us bringing in all these mandates and trying to fix the earth from a 10% rational mind. Yeah? We've got to heal ourselves. When we are making good choices, the land will be well. So, when the masculine part of all of us, the rational part of all of us is sick, yeah, the land becomes a wasteland. We think about levels of depression and anxiety right now on the planet. So what can heal the wounded masculine? The Grail, the wisdom of the soul. You know, mental health at the moment, it's big on labels. That's what the ego does. It likes to label everything because it's afraid of chaos and the unknown. So if I'm labeling everything, well, I'm going to feel better. It's like, you know, putting Tupperware labels on a pantry. But it's a compulsion. It doesn't actually heal anything. In fact, it empowers one's identity as wounded. One over-identifies as the wound, not as the healer that chose those wounds in order to learn and transmute them. So in the West, we have much higher rates of anxiety and depression than the East. Interesting that. The more masculine culture, despite the fact that we have a much higher standard of living, we're not really enjoying it. Coming into London the other day from Bali, fuck, that place looked depressed. You only had to look at the houses, and the houses look sad. You know, it's like the people living in these houses are miserable. I swear. So, yeah, we're mental. Yeah. I was living in Morocco earlier this year for 4 months. They're so more chilled. I mean, they do smoke a lot of hash, but just by contrast, you see, we're so caught up in productivity. I've got to show my value all the time. There's so much pressure on us to do. And their culture is very different. They're mystics. So to balance the mind, we need the key to the lost wisdom of the heart, the Grail. And because the mind is louder than the wisdom of the heart, that we need a guide, yeah? So today we see many Westerners desperately seeking mystic initiation by going to the Amazon, by going to Native America, to seeking out what they think are legitimate Indigenous people. Because our own Indigenous mystic tradition has been so buried. But the true Grail has the power to heal us and the land. So the Grail, as I said, is the red path where we bow to the wisdom of the cycles. Show of hands, who cries at the opening scene of The Lion King? Right? That song, The Circle of Life, speaks to our knowing. It's like, I'm part of this. That's powerful. I need to know my place in the circle of life, in the great wheel, for me to step into my potential. The only thing that has any actual power over us are the cycles of nature and the cosmos. Yeah? We have abdicated our power. I'll show you what I mean. So here we see the 5-pointed star. Just notice if you have a reaction and go, oh, that looks evil. There's the conditioning. So this is the shape the planet Venus makes as she moves through the cosmos, which is why it always represented feminine wisdom. It is the Moroccan flag, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And this was once recognised as the law of the land, hence the ancient spelling of the word law. We bow to the natural law, yeah, to the quantum laws, the universal laws, knowing that they're the only thing that, of course, if I'm an oscillating particle of energy and the concert of larger spheres has an effect on me. You can say, oh, I don't believe in astrology. Well, you don't have to believe it. It's still having an effect on you, just like gravity will make your tits sag, even if you don't believe in it. So this is what the empire replaced it with. We're the law of the land. Right? So without guidance to align with the natural spiral, the ebb and flow, we push against it like a salmon and we wear ourselves out and we're stressed and we remain stunted and immature. The more immature our psyche, the more we abdicate our power. Oh, hot potato, hot potato. Ugh. Don't trust ourselves to make good choices. All the Grail parables highlighted the power of our choices. So, as we saw in 2020, crisis reveals our level of maturity. If our psyche is at the level of child, we will do anything to feel safe. We'll please and appease, hence all the virtue signalling. Yeah, I had my shot. I'm a good girl. I'm a good boy. Yeah. You can't wake somebody up that is internally 7 years of age. Look at this. Ah! It's got to be more gentle than that. Likewise, we saw others respond as teenagers, rebelling against authority to assert their autonomy. But all that does is give the oppressor a reason to come down harder. It polarises. Or we can respond as an adult and go, okay, I'm responsible for me and my choices. I'm going to embody my values. I am incorruptible like gold. Pure consciousness. I do not abdicate my power. I do not recognise their power. I will stand sovereign in my inner power. I will speak my truth from the heart. So if we have a quick look around the room, just do a bit of a rubberneck for a moment. Have a look around. What do you see in this room? Anyone want to yell out what they see?
People.
Huh? People? Good answer, right answer. What type of people are we looking at here? Well, yep, true. Colourful, yep, agreed. How about old? Right? I would say if we got the median age here, it's about 50 or more. Right? Yeah. Who comes to an event like this? Mature people, right? People that have done enough navel gazing and looking at their own crap to be able to hear about the crap of the global shadow. If you haven't done any integration on your own shortcomings, your own wounds, you can't deal with the wounds of the world. It's too much. So, we are the unlikely heroes, the elders, the mystics, the sages, those who are soul dominant. So up until the age of 7, we're soul dominant. Yeah? And then, end of that first 7-year cycle, we start going, oh, what do they think of me? And the ego becomes more dominant. And then life pummels us. It breaks us, cracks us open like a mustard seed in a hot pan until we become soul dominant again, humbled. Which is why we need to revere elders. They've done more winters, more descents. They've humbled their ego. So it's going to be the elders that lead us through that doorway in the heart, not what we've been led to believe. Yeah, we're going to save it with a... Yeah, right. Don't see an elder amongst them, not a grey hair, right? So, when the hero and the mystic join forces, then we're unstoppable. The hero can't rise without the mystic. The hero will sabotage himself. He won't believe in himself. I say he, I'm speaking to everyone because the masculine part of us, yeah. So, Piers was saying that when he was seeing a woman that helped him sort out his psyche by going and having tarot readings, then he could cross the threshold into union and embrace it with a whole heart because he wasn't caught in the conflict of his mind. Forgive me for using you as an example, brother. Thank you. So it occurred to me at 2:30 in the morning when some downloads happened that this is why the Arcturians have been putting crop circles on the Michael Mary dragon lines. Right? Michael is the hero. Yeah? Mary is the mystic. They weave through the south of England. So these are these magical sigils. Yeah? These symbols are like acupuncture, healing the collective hero and mystic. Yeah? Without maturity, we sabotage our psychological and emotional well-being, and our relationships. And if we are breaking down internally, our relationships and our families break down. So we can see those invisible structures, they're collapsing at a fast rate. And that's creating secondary social problems. Homelessness. I was homeless for a year as a single mum with a 5-year-old, and it is common. We're seeing more homelessness amongst older women as well, the biggest demographic now. So we need those invisible structures, just like a tomato needs a trellis to grow and to weather the winds of change. So do we. We need circle every month to hold us, so that like a basket, we're woven, we're strong together, so we don't unravel like a basket case. So without the social structures that developed during the age of cancer, when the feminine discovered that we could harvest wild wheat, and out of that grew civilization, and these Grail practices were what were central to life in the Western world. Without them, we have this Venn diagram. And rather than drink from the cup of death, the Grail cup, the bitter truth that we have to look at in ourselves, people will just knock down a claret. I can't laugh on this thing, sorry. So rather than shift their perception, they just want to dull the pain. Without the Grail, we create a cycle of entropy and destruction with good intentions, hell on earth, instead of, like the beautiful Fibonacci spiral or a fern, a cycle of growth, creating heaven on earth through conscious choices. The Grail consisted of a series of rites of passage, one for every life stage. It's not just, oh, you get a welcome to manhood. Oh yeah, see you, buddy, enjoy that. No, you get welcomed, and then you sit in circle every month, and then you're assisted in your crossing from the young buck, the warrior, into the next stage of king, and so on. So patriarchy stole our rights, changed the meaning of them so that they empowered the system, not the individual. So, wedlock, till death do you part. Well, you made your bed, you can lie in it. Or graduation, the more you climb the tier of indoctrination in the Ivy League halls, the more we'll reward you. Oh, thank you. Frick, I better get a move on. All right, you get the gist. So, even doing the sign of the cross, you're literally charging up the cult. You're branding yourself like cattle and saying, my body is yours. The empire programs men to seek power, not love. And we only seek power if we don't believe love is possible. It's a second best. Like the Fisher King, the wounded masculine in both men and women keeps us on a compulsive quest to try and assert status, power, wealth, to feel safe, to feel valid. So after 2,000 years of patriarchal programming, most men overlook the wisdom of the feminine in favour of seeking a peak experience with a plant diva. The more extreme his loss of control, the more machismo and kudos a man earns from his peers. Oh yeah, but have you done a boga? This signals the warrior phase, the youth, who is trying to prove how much he doesn't need his mother. Yeah, he's independent from the feminine. But without initiation into the Grail, men struggle to make that shift from warrior to king, to claim their sovereignty. So, here we go. The Holy Grail, what it was an annual rite of passage. It was the meeting of the young buck, the young stag, with the goddess, so that he didn't destroy himself midwinter during the darkest of days when his shadow was eclipsing him, because men are ruled by the sun. If your soul chooses to incarnate into a male form, you are more affected by the sun cycle, just as for women we're more affected by the moon. So, here we see a picture of the Magdalene holding up the mirror to the unicorn, the sacred masculine symbol. She helped men reflect on his choices. You know, your partner can't show you your shadow because she's too close. You'll say, yeah, whatever. But if another woman who has no other investment in you says, hey, buddy, you really need to look at that, you might listen. So, the Holy Grail helped men to see how their immaturity was sabotaging their growth and their happiness in love. Men would seek the dragon to ensure that they were noble enough to enter into a sacred union. The dragon was the dragon lady, a woman who was connected with the dragon lines, the ley lines, a woman who had awakened her fire, her dragon power, her kundalini, the force. So she would confront him with his unconscious behaviour. Here we have an image of the dark feminine as Kali Ma. You might know her as Medusa, Sekhmet, Oya, all one and the same, Pele. She represents the archetype of the dark mother, the aspect of the goddess who will evoke a man's deepest fears of being destroyed and rejected by the feminine. We've been taught to view women as temptress and serpents as evil by the cult of Rome, the great deceiver. But the Grail liberates men from their deepest fear of being dominated and destroyed, which frees them from being used as a pawn by the empire. Men would take part in the Holy Grail at midwinter, which is the darkest, deepest, most inward, feminine time of the wheel. This is when men are most at risk of illness, injury, and suicide if their inner feminine is not healthy and integrated. This was a rite of passage that assisted men with their supreme ordeal in their hero's journey annually. During this time, while the men were away, the women would hold a vigil of light. They would sing songs like Silent Night, Holy Night, awaiting the birth of the Sun King, which is in every man, not just one man. And when they returned, so it was a 9-day rite of passage, 4 days spiralling in and then having the winter solstice, and then 4 days spiralling out, making conscious choices for the year ahead. They would return from the forest on December 25th, and the women and the children would have been eagerly awaiting their return, baking goods, decorating the evergreen tree. But the Roman Empire outlawed the Grail. The stag, like these reindeer, was enslaved, and the collective masculine disempowered. The Holy Grail rite of passage is what awakens Cernunnos, the stag king, the heart of the sacred masculine. Known as the Green Man or the Oak King, he inspired the folk hero Robin Hood, a sovereign, a wise and heart-centered man who served the land and his people. This stag night involved men undertaking matrimony, which was wedding themselves to the earth. And that is how a man then awakened his sense of purpose. A man without a purpose is at risk of suicide. Only then was he knighted. Okay, this represents the cutting of the head off. Yeah, slight nick to the neck. But this was appropriated by the empire. Instead of swearing allegiance to the earth, guess who they swore it to? The empire. So the key, which the ankh looks like the soul, the big halo around the head. This is, if we don't receive the key to the sacred mysteries, we don't awaken our tapua, which means sacred power in the Polynesian tradition. That's true power. Here we see the unicorn in chains on the British Empire's emblem. You look up, what is a unicorn? Why is the unicorn in chains? I googled this when I was writing back in 2013. And it says because he is a dangerous beast. Right? The sacred masculine is dangerous to the empire because he thinks for himself. His horn comes out of his third eye. He's found wisdom. So, his power has been diminished here because your wild lands were cleared. Coming from Australia, where we still have a lot of wild land, we have easier access to our wild archetypes. Yeah, I'll burp and fart if I need to, without shame. Without the Grail rites, men were impotent to act in the face of oppressors. Instead, watching reenactments of the hero's journey or Marvel franchises fantasizing about being the man that saves the world single-handed. You're not meant to do it on your own. We're all meant to do it. To awaken the hero, men must face their fears every month as the sun illuminates them. This symposium started on the 26th of July, the date that the annual Lionsgate opens, when the Sun, Orion and Sirius all form a line, which is, of course, an alignment that the Giza pyramids were built to align with. This is the time when the sun is moving through Leo, when we have 20 times the amount of galactic light from Sirius bathing us, calling us to step up, to be lion-hearted, to have courage, to act from the heart, Kurus. A man's first Holy Grail rite was when he took vows and earned that title of knight. And he would then journey the solar wheel. You know, the Knights of the Round Table, it's not a piece of furniture. Yeah, just like all the sacred texts, they're metaphors. It was a practice of journeying in brotherhood around the solar wheel. And now, here we see the symbol for Aquarius. What is it? It's the Grail, the water bearer, the sacred vessel. It is the 11th hour. Aquarius is the 11th sign on the zodiac wheel. It is time to call the men back, to be initiated by the women. Here we see the Grail flag, second last major arcana tarot. The Grail is what will wake people up out of their sleep state. There's the herald angel. And in the Norse tradition, Ragnarok, this time of upheaval, it was also symbolised by the sounding of the horn, and it's time to climb the rainbow bridge. Here we see the horn used to have the notches of the 13 moons. It was women that were the rulers. This is where the word ruler comes from, because we were the ones, because we journey 13 times a year, our ego is humbled. Yeah, so we were the ones that marked time.
We have to close.
We do, okay. So I'll call it a night because I know we've got to pack down here, but my book is out there. I also have a free video series called Awakening the Sacred Masculine on my website. Let's see if oh man, there was so much more to get through. Another day, another time. Oh, I'm doing this show. I'd love anyone that feels like jumping on a Ryanair flight to Edinburgh next week. It's for the 888 Lionsgate portal, and it's the Ascension of Venus. I'm hoping to sell it to Netflix. I've just been working 14-hour days since January 5 on this show, 7 days a week, and it's been my Everest. But it's an offering to help heal the world's soul through a reenactment of the heroine's journey. So thanks for having me. Yeah.
Thank you, Tanishka. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Fantastic stuff.